Hey guys, I hope this video finds you well. I hope this new year brings you plenty of success and prosperity in every endeavor. The purpose of this video is for educational, entertainment, and informative purposes only. It is not meant to express support or condemnation for the alleged suspect. It is a neutral observation of judicial processes, why we are here, how we got here, and what the future will look like after the trial of Luigi Mangione. So, the background story. On Wednesday, December 4th, the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, was SHOT and KILLED, allegedly by a person of interest. And on December 4th through December 9th, a national manhunt led by the New York City Police Department ensued, resulting in the December 9th, 2024 apprehension of a 26-year-old Italian-American named Luigi Mangione. On the night of the apprehension, December 9th, 2024, social media reacted to the apprehension of the suspect at an Altoona, Pennsylvania McDonald's, with widespread support pouring in for the alleged assassin and condemnation pouring in from a minority plurality of individuals. On December 10th, while being escorted into the Blair County Courthouse, Luigi Mangione shouted before the public in the press media, quote, "It is completely out of touch and it is an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience."
And it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience. And it's completely out of touch and it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience.
Okay, so you just heard that for reference. He was alluding to being scapegoated and railroaded by the New York and Pennsylvania court system, and that the American people who resonate with him may understand that to be the case. On December 19th, Luigi Mangione waived extradition and was sent from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to the state of New York. In a highly publicized perp walk. On December 23rd, 2024, Mangione was in the New York Supreme Court, where he pleaded not guilty. Also, during that court arraignment, his attorney, Karen Agnifilo, expressed to the judge that she believes her client may not receive a fair trial, which is his constitutional right, on the ground that politicians like the indicted for fraud, bribery, Mayor Eric Adams, have made statements declaring Mangione to be guilty before proving so. She also expressed double jeopardy concerns because many of the charges in the New York, Pennsylvania, and United States cases against Mangione are duplicate charges with similar penalties. Many have also expressed concerns about whether or not Luigi Mangione being charged with terrorism is a fair charge because it is subject to vague interpretation as to whether or not he committed an act of terror. Many have expressed support or condemnation in the aftermath. He has also become a sex symbol to some on social media. An Economist YouGov poll conducted from December 15th to December 17th, surveying 1,553 U.S. adult citizens, found that 43% of American citizens had a somewhat favorable or very unfavorable view of Mangione, while 21% had a somewhat favorable or very favorable view of him. 37% were unsure or neutral. Mangione received the most support from citizens aged 18 to 29, who viewed him favorably by a 39-29% margin, and very liberal citizens, progressive citizens, who viewed him favorably by a 47% to 31% margin. Mangione was viewed least favorably by citizens aged 65 or older. 65% unfavorable to 5% favorable, and very conservative citizens 62 unfavorable to 8% favorable. The Center for Strategic Politics ran an online poll with 455 American adults on December 11th and found that 61% of respondents said they have a strong or somewhat negative perception of Mangione. 19% had a positive or somewhat positive view, and 21% did not know or were neutral. Opinions on Mangione vary dramatically by age, with respondents under 45 holding a more positive view of him than those over 45. Additionally, they indicated that men were more likely to support Mangione than women. Black and Hispanic respondents were more likely to support him than white respondents. The poll also found that young Americans view Mangione far more favorably than they viewed Thompson and United Healthcare. A poll of 6,000 U.S. adults was conducted by Cloud Research on December 19th utilizing artificial intelligence, AI. The poll found that roughly 1 in 4 respondents, 25%, was sympathetic to Mangione. Okay, so there you have it. That gives you context as to what happened, what led up to this moment, and where we are going. Now, let's start our video in depth and detail. So let's read the New York indictment of Luigi Mangione, the people of New York versus Mangione. Supreme Court of the State of New York County of New York, the people of the State of New York against Luigi Mangione, defendant. The grand jury of the County of New York, by this indictment, accuses the defendant of the crime of murder in the first degree in violation of Penal Code 125-27 1A 8 and B, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York, on or about December 4th, 2024, being more than 18 years old at the time of the crime of the commission of the crime, with the intent to cause the death of another person, caused the death of Brian Thompson, and said person was killed in furtherance of an act of terrorism involving a violent act and acts dangerous to human life that were in violation of the criminal laws of this state and were intended to intimidate or coerce the civilian population, influence the policies of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, and affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping. Second count. And the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment further accuses the defendant of the crime of murder in the second degree as a crime of terrorism in violation of Penal Code 125-25-1 and 490-25 committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York on or about December 4th, 2024, with intent to intimidate or coerce the civilian population, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, and affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping, committed the specified offense of murder in the second degree, in that defendant with the intent to the death of another person caused the death of Brian Thompson. Third count. And the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment further accuses the defendant of the crime of murder in the second degree in violation of Penal Code 125-25 committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York on or about December 4th, 2024, with intent to cause the death of another person, caused the death of Brian Thompson. Fourth count, and the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment further accuses the defendant of crime of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree in violation of Penal Code 265-03 1B. An armed felony committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York on or about December 4th, 2024, possessed a loaded firearm with the intent to use the same unlawfully against another person. Fifth count. And the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree in violation of Penal Code 265-03, an armed felony committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York on or about December 4th, 2024, possessed a loaded firearm, said possession not being in the defendant's home or place of business. Sixth count. And the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree in violation of Penal Code 265-03/7, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York on or about December 4th, 2024, possessed an assault weapon. Seventh count. And the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree. in violation of Penal Code 265-02, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York, on or about December 4th, 2024, possessed a firearm silencer. Eighth count. In the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment, further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of the weapon in the third degree in violation of Penal Code 265-02-8, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York, on or about December 4th, 2024, possessed a large capacity ammunition feeding device, to wit, a Glock magazine. Ninth count. In the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment, further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree in violation of Penal Code 265-02/8, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York, on or about December 4th, 2024, possessed large capacity magazine feeding device, to wit, Magpul magazine. 10th count. In the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment, further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of a weapon in the fourth degree in violation of Penal Code 265-01/9, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York, on or about December 4th, 2024, not being licensed as a gunsmith or dealer in firearms pursuant to Penal Code 400-00, and knowing that it was a ghost gun, possessed a ghost gun. 11th count. In the grand jury aforesaid by this indictment, further accuses the defendant of the crime of criminal possession of a forged instrument in the second degree in violation of Penal Code 170-25, committed as follows. The defendant in the County of New York, on or about November 24th, 2024, knowing the instrument to be forged and with the intent to defraud, deceive, and injure another person, uttered and possessed a forged instrument, the same being and purporting to be, and calculated to become and to represent, if completed, a written instrument officially issued and created by a public office, public servant, or governmental instrumentality, to wit, a New York driver's license. Alvin L. Bragg, Jr., District Attorney. The people of New York filed against Luigi Mangione, defendant. Okay, so that was the reading of the New York indictment against Luigi Mangione. Next, I will read the statute that was largely used to indict Luigi Mangione, the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2001. The Anti-Terrorism Act of 2001, Senate Bill 70002, 194th Legislature, 2nd Special Session, 2001, New York Laws, Chapter 300, is a New York criminal law passed in the wake of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks that created a new section of the New York Penal Code for terrorism-related crimes. Article 490, New York Penal Law 490. The bill was introduced in a special session of the New York State Legislature on September 17, 2001. It was passed by overwhelming majorities of both houses and signed into law by Governor George Pataki the same day. Provisions. New terrorism-related crimes. The Anti-Terrorism Act of 2001 created 6 crimes related to terrorism. They are, number 1, soliciting or providing support for an act of terrorism in the second degree, a Class D felony, Section 490-10 in the Penal Code. Number 2, soliciting or providing support for an act of terrorism in the first degree, a Class C felony, Section 490-15 of the New York Penal Code. Number 3, making a terroristic threat, a Class D felony, Section 490-20 in the New York Penal Code. Number 4, crime of terrorism, Section 490-25 in the New York Penal Code. Hindering prosecution of terrorism in the second degree, a Class C felony, Section 490-30 in the New York Penal Code. Section 6, hindering prosecution of terrorism in the first degree, a Class B felony, Section 490-35 in the New York Penal Code. Soliciting or providing support for an act of terrorism. Section 490-10 and 490-15 make it a crime to intentionally provide or solicit material support or resources to be used in an act of terrorism. Material support can include almost any assistance to an act of terrorism, including money, training, logistics, personnel, or weapons. When the material support provided to an act of terrorism exceeds $1,000, the offense is in the first degree. Making a terroristic threat. Section 490-20 of the New York Penal Code, via this law, makes it a felony to threaten to commit an act of terrorism when the threat causes a reasonable expectation or fear of the imminent commission of such offense, even if the defendant does not intend to carry out the threat or is physically unable to do so. He may be charged with violating Section 490-20. Crime of terrorism. Unlike the other provisions of the law, Section 490-25, crime of terrorism, does not directly create a standalone charge. It instead allows the state to charge defendants with committing certain felonies as crimes of terrorism. For a violation of Section 490-25, the elements of the crime and the level of the offense are dependent upon the severity of an underlying specified offense. Section 490-25(1), a person is guilty of a crime of terrorism when, with the intent to intimidate or coerce the civilian population, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping, he or she commits a specified offense. Under the definition in the Act, the specified offense is any non-drug Class A felony, any violent felony, second-degree manslaughter, or first-degree criminal tampering. To convict someone of the crime of terrorism, a prosecutor must show first that the defendant is guilty of the underlying specified act, and second, the specified act was committed with the intent to intimidate or coerce the civilian population, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping. Once the prosecutor shows these elements, a conviction under Section 490-25 is treated as a sentencing enhancement to the specified offense, and a conviction for the specified offense as a crime of terrorism that is typically a Class C, D, or E felony is sentenced to a Class B, C, or D felony, respectively. A conviction for a Class B felony as a crime of terrorism is sentenced as a Class A to I felony, and a conviction for a Class A to I felony as a crime of terrorism results in a mandatory life sentence without parole. Hindering prosecution of terrorism. Sections 490-30 and 490-35 apply the already existing crime of hindering prosecution to the terrorism content. While existing law made the most serious crime of hindering prosecution a Class D felony, the Anti-Terrorism Act made hindering the prosecution of terrorism a Class C felony in most cases. However, when the act of terrorism involved deaths, hindering its prosecution is a Class B felony. And now I'm going to read the announcement of the federal charges against Luigi Mangione, as well as the Pennsylvania charges against Luigi Mangione. And then I'll come in and provide my commentary on what I think about the charges and whether or not he will win or lose this case. Just looking at it objectively, not in promotion of anything violent. Okay, so the federal charges announcement. Luigi Mangione charged with the stalking and murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson and use of silencer and a crime of violence. Thursday, December 19, 2024, for immediate release, Office of Public Affairs. A criminal complaint was unsealed today charging Luigi Nicholas Mangione, 26 of Townsend, Maryland, in the connection with the December 4th events. Mangione was taken into federal custody today and will be presented this afternoon in Manhattan Federal Court before U.S. Magistrate Judge Catherine H. Parker for the Southern District of New York. Today, the Justice Department has brought federal murder charges against Luigi Mangione, said Attorney General Merrick B. Garland. As alleged, Mangione planned his attack for months and stalked his victim for days before murdering and them, methodically planning when, where, and how to carry out his crime. I am grateful to our state and local law enforcement partners for their tireless efforts to locate and apprehend the defendant and to ensure that he answers for his alleged crime. Brian Thompson was GUNNED down in code BLOOD as he walked down the street in Midtown Manhattan, said acting U.S. Attorney Edward Y. Kim for the Southern District of New York. Thompson was allegedly KILLED'd just because he held the position of Chief Executive Officer of a health insurance company. As alleged, Luigi Mangione traveled to New York to stalk and shoot Thompson in broad daylight in front of a Manhattan hotel, all in a grossly misguided attempt to broadcast Mangione's views across the country. But this wasn't a debate. It was MURDER, and Mangione now faces federal charges. This office and its law enforcement partners remain steadfast in our commitment to fight violence in whatever form it takes. Luigi Mangione allegedly conducted a carefully premeditated and targeted execution of Brian Thompson to incite national debates, said Assistant Director James E. Dennedy of the Federal Bureau of Investigation New York Field Office. This alleged plot demonstrates a cavalier attitude towards humanity, deeming murder as an appropriate recourse to satiate personal grievances. Though continued close partnership with the NYPD through the FBI maintains our steadfast commitment to fervently pursue any individual who promotes a personal agenda through violence. NYPD detectives work relentlessly to identify and widely distribute images of the suspect who allegedly carried out this premeditated, pre-planned, targeted murder, and they are committed to assisting prosecutors in seeing this important case through to its rightful conclusion, said Commissioner Jessica S. Tisch of the New York City Police Department, NYPD. This senseless incident highlights the critical role of the public in the New York Police Department's public safety mission, and I thank everyone who saw something and said something and did something. It is because of the public actions that we now have an alleged killer in custody back in New York City. As alleged in the complaint, over the course of the last several months, Mangione meticulously planned the execution of Brian Thompson in an effort to initiate a public discussion about the healthcare industry. Mangione targeted his victim, tracked his whereabouts, and traveled from out of state to New York City, where the victim was scheduled to attend the company's investors conference. After arriving in the city on November 24th, more than 1 week before the murder, Mangione performed reconnaissance in the area around the victim's hotel and the conference venue where the victim was scheduled to speak. Using false identification, Mangione checked into an Upper West Side hostel. In the early hours of December 4th, Mangione traveled by bicycle from the Upper West Side to the area around West 54th Street and 6th Avenue. At approximately 6:45 a.m., Mangione strategically placed himself in between two cars on West 54th Street, and as the victim passed by, Mangione walked up behind the victim and fired several gunshots from a 9mm pistol, causing the victim's death. The pistol was equipped with what appeared to be a firearm sound suppressor or silencer. After the murder, Mangione fled on his bicycle northbound through Central Park and ultimately back to the Upper West Side. On December 9th, Mangione was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, while he sat in a fast food restaurant after being recognized by one of the restaurant's workers. Members of the Altoona Police Department confronted Mangione, and who provided the same false identification ID, Mark Vazario, that he used when checking into the Upper West Side hostel. Mangione was also found in possession of, among other things, a 9mm pistol and a sound suppressor, consistent with the weapon used to kill the victim. Mangione is charged with one count of using a firearm to commit murder, which carries a maximum penalty of death or life in prison. One count of interstate stalking, resulting in death, which carries a maximum penalty of life in prison. One count of stalking through use of interstate facilities, resulting in death, which carries a maximum penalty of life in prison. One count of discharging a firearm that was equipped with a silencer in furtherance of a crime of violence, which carries a maximum penalty of life in prison, and a mandatory minimum penalty of 30 years. A federal district court judge will determine any sentencing after considering the U.S. sentencing guidelines and other statutory factors. The FBI's Violent Crime Task Force and the NYPD are investigating the case. The Justice Department also thanked the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which has brought a separate prosecution against Mangione, which is currently expected to proceed to trial before the federal case. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Dominic A. Gentile, Zhang Zhang, Alexandra Masseter for the Southern District of New York are prosecuting the case. A criminal complaint is merely an allegation. All defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. A criminal complaint is merely an allegation. All defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Okay, so that was the announcement of the federal charges against Luigi Mangione in United States versus Mangione. Luigi Mangione federal complaint, December 18th, 2024. United States District Court, 7th District of New York, United States of America versus Luigi Nicholas Mangione, defendant. Sealed complaint, violations of 18 U.S. Code, sections 2261A, 2261B, 924J, 924C. County of Offense, New York. 7th District of New York, SS. Gary W. Cobbs, being duly sworn, deposes and says he is a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and charges as follows. Count 1, stalking, travel and interstate commerce. From at least in or about November 24th, 2024 to in or about December 4th, 2024 in the 7th District of New York and elsewhere, Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant, traveled in interstate commerce with the intent to kill, injure, harass, intimidate, and place under surveillance with the intent to kill, injure, harass, and intimidate another person, and in the course of and as a result of such travel, engaged in conduct that placed that person in reasonable fear of the death of and seriously bodily injury to that person, and in the course of engaging in such conduct, caused the death of that person. To wit, Mangione traveled from Georgia to New York, for the purpose of stalking and killing Brian Thompson. And while in New York, Mangione stalked and then shot and killed Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th Street and 6th Avenue. Title 18 United States Code, Sections 2261A, 1A, and 2261B, 1. Count 2, stalking, use of interstate facilities. From at least in or about November 24, 2024 to in or about December 4, 2024 in the 7th District of New York and elsewhere, Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant, with the intent to kill, injure, harass, intimidate, and place under surveillance with the intent to kill, injure, harass, and intimidate another person, used an electronic communication service, an electronic communication system of interstate commerce, in a facility of interstate or foreign commerce, to engage in a course of conduct that placed that person in a reasonable fear of the death of and serious bodily injury to that person, and in the course of engaging in such conduct, caused the death of that person. To wit, Mangione used the cell phone, interstate wires, interstate highways, and the internet to plan and carry out the stalking, shooting, and killing of Brian Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan. Title 18 United States Code, Section 2261A, 2A, and 2261B1. Count free. Murder through use of a firearm. On or about December 4th, 2024, in the 7th District of New York and elsewhere, Luigi Nicholas Mangione, during and in relation to crimes of violence for which he may be prosecuted in a court of the United States, namely the stalking offenses charged in counts 1 and 2 of this complaint, knowingly used and carried a firearm, and in furtherance of such crime possessed a firearm, and in the course of that crime caused the death of another person through the use of a firearm, which killing is murder as defined in Title 18 United States Code, Section 1111A, to wit, Mangione shot and killed Brian Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan. Title 18 United States Code, Section 924J. Count 4, firearms offense. On or about December 4th, 2024, in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant, during and in relation to crimes of violence for which he may be prosecuted in a court of the United States, namely the stalking offense charged in counts 1 and count 2 of this complaint, knowingly used and carried a firearm, and in furtherance of such crime possessed a firearm which was brandished and discharged, and which was equipped with a firearm silencer and firearm muffler. Title 18 United States Code 924C 1A I 2 3 and C1B2. The murder of Brian Thompson. The basis for my knowledge and for the foregoing charges are in part as follows. 5. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and am assigned to the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force, and I have been personally involved in the investigation of this matter. This affidavit is based upon my conversations with other law enforcement officials, my examination of documents obtained through court-authorized search warrant, my review of documents prepared by others, security camera video, and my involvement in this investigation. Because this affidavit is being submitted for the limited purposes of establishing probable cause, it does not include all of the facts that I have learned during the course of my investigation. Where the contents of documents and the actions and statements and conversations of others are reported herein, they are reported in substance and in part, except where otherwise indicated. 6. Based on my participation in this investigation, my conversation with other law enforcement officers, my review of documents prepared by others, and my review of security camera video, I have learned, among other things, the following. On December 4th, 2024, at approximately 6:45 a.m., Brian Thompson, the victim, the chief executive officer of a nationwide health insurance company, Company 1, United Healthcare, was shot and killed by a masked assailant, the shooter, while walking on West 54th Street towards a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The Midtown Hotel, where Company 1 investor conference was scheduled to begin at 8 o'clock a.m. As discussed below, the shooter was later identified to be Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant. Security camera video showed the shooter, who was wearing a gray backpack. The gray backpack come from between two parked cars, walked up behind the victim and shoot the victim in the leg and back outside of the Midtown Hotel entrance on West 54th Street. The firearm the shooter used appeared to have a sound-suppressing device or silencer attached to the front of its barrel. A still image from the security camera video of the shooting is provided below. B. Law enforcement personnel who responded to the scene of the shooting recovered, among other items, spent 9mm shell casings and at least one round of live 9mm ammunition. The words deny, delay, and depose were written on the side of some of the shell casings. Responding law enforcement personnel also recovered a cell phone in the vicinity of the location where the shooting had occurred. The investigation. 7. Based on my participation in this investigation, my conversations with other law enforcement officials, my examination of documents obtained through court-authorized search warrant, my review of the documents prepared by others, and my review of security camera video, I know that over the course of the next several days, investigators retrieved and reviewed hundreds of hours of recordings from nearby security cameras to track the shooter's movements both before and after the murder. From that review, investigators were able to formulate the following timeline of the shooter's movements from November 24th, 2024, up to and including December 4th, 2024. A. On November 24th, 2024, at approximately 10:11 p.m., the shooter arrived in New York City on an inner-city bus at the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan. The bus originated in Atlanta, Georgia. The shooter took a taxi to the area around the Midtown Hotel and stayed in the area for approximately 1 hour before taking another taxi to a hostel located in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, the hostel. The shooter registered at the hostel under the name Mark Rosario, provided a false New York Jersey driver's license as a form of identification. The false New Jersey ID. A photograph of the false New Jersey ID is provided below. When the shooter was checking in at the hostel, the desk clerk asked the shooter to remove his mask, which he did, revealing his face to a security camera, as shown below. Other than his interaction with the desk clerk, the shooter consistently kept his mask on throughout his time in New York, including while inside the hostel. On November 4th, 2024, at approximately 5:35 a.m., the shooter left the hostel wearing a gray backpack and rode an electric bicycle down Central Park West to a location near the Midtown Hotel, as shown below. At approximately 5:41 a.m., the shooter walked around the area of the Midtown Hotel and at one point purchased items from a nearby coffee shop. The shooter then returned to a bench in the vicinity of the Midtown Hotel. On at least one occasion prior to the murder, the shooter was depicted using a cell phone. At approximately 6:45 a.m., after waiting near the Midtown Hotel for approximately an hour, the shooter saw and approached the victim, shot the victim multiple times, and then fled on foot to West 55th Street, where the shooter mounted the electric bicycle and rode towards Central Park. After disappearing inside the park for a period of time, the shooter was captured on video again exiting the park near West 77th Street in Central Park West, riding north on West Park Central when he emerged from the park. The shooter, no longer carrying the gray backpack, as shown below. At approximately 6:58 a.m., security camera footage captured the shooter riding the electric bicycle near West 85th Street and Columbus Avenue. 2 minutes later, at approximately 7 a.m., the shooter was captured on video near West 86th Street and Columbus Avenue without an electric bicycle. At approximately 7:04 a.m., the shooter entered a taxi that drove him to the George Washington Bridge bus terminal in the vicinity of West 179th Street and Fort Washington Avenue in Upper Manhattan. The shooter's face was captured by a camera in the taxi, as shown below. At approximately 7:30 a.m., video footage from the George Washington Bridge bus terminal captured the shooter entering the facility. No video footage showed the shooter leaving the bus terminal, suggesting that the shooter left New York City. On or about December 6, 2024, law enforcement officers searching Central Park found a gray backpack matching the appearance of the gray backpack worn by the shooter as depicted below. The arrest and identification of the shooter. Based on my participation in this investigation, my conversations with other law enforcement officers, my examination of documents and items obtained through a court-authorized search warrant, my review of documents prepared by others, and my review of security cameras video, I know, among other things, on December 9, 2024, at approximately 9:14 a.m., a worker at a fast food restaurant in Altoona, Pennsylvania, called the police about a male customer later identified as Luigi Mangione, the defendant, who the worker believed resembled photos of the shooter that had been broadcast in the media following the victim's murder. Members of the Altoona Police Department responded and encountered Mangione, who they also believed matched the appearance of the shooter. When approached by responding officers and asked for identification, Mangione offered the false New Jersey ID used by the shooter to check into the hostel. Mangione was later found to be in possession of a loaded 9mm pistol and silencer consistent with the weapon used to kill the victim, clothing that matched apparel that the shooter wore in the security camera video, the notebook, several thousands of dollars in cash, an envelope associated with an FDIC-insured bank, and a letter addressed to the Fed's letter. The 9mm pistol and silencer were later tested and found to be operable by a ballistics examiner from the New York City Police Department. Photographs of the firearm and the silencer recovered from Mangione are depicted below. The notebook contained several handwritten pages that expressed hostility towards the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. For example, the notebook contained the following statements and entries that appear to correspond to particular dates. In an entry marked as 8/15, August 15th, 2024, the notebook described how the details are finally coming together, and I'm glad in a way that I procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about acronym for the company. 1, UAC. The notebook entry also stated that the target is insurance because it checks every box. 2, in an entry marked as 10/22, October 22nd, 2024. The notebook stated 1.5 months. This investors conference is the true windfall. And most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. Later on in the entry, the notebook described as an intent to whack the CEO of one of the insurance companies at its investors conference. As described above, October 22nd, 2024 was approximately 6 weeks before the date of the murder of the victim, which occurred on the day of Company 1 United Healthcare Investors Conference. D. The Fed's letter recovered from Mangione stated, I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, lots of patience. Based on my own research, I believe that CAD refers to computer-aided design. The Fed's letter also stated, P.S. You can check serial numbers to verify this is all self-funded. My own ATM withdrawals. 9. Based on all of the above, my review of the photographs of the shooter and my review of the arrest photographs of Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant, I respectfully submit that Mangione is the shooter who shot and killed the victim on December 4th, 2024. Additionally, the notebook entries, the Fed letter, the shooter's apparent surveillance of the Midtown Hotel on November 4th, 2024 to December 4th, 2024, and the shooter's use of counter-surveillance techniques and escape from New York City all suggest that the shooter undertook extensive efforts to identify the victim, place the victim under surveillance, and track the victim's whereabouts in the time period leading up to the murder. Below are the surveillance stills of the shooter and an arrest photograph of Mangione. Wherefore, I respectfully request that a warrant be issued for the arrest of Luigi Nicholas Mangione, the defendant, and that he be imprisoned or bailed as the case may be. Gary W. Cobb, without permission. Gary W. Cobb, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Sworn to me through the transmission of this complaint by reliable electronic means pursuant to Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure 4-1 and 41-B D3. D3. This 18th day of December 2024. Honorable Catherine H. Parker, United States Magistrate Judge, Southern District of New York. Okay, so that was the reading of the federal complaint against Luigi Mangione. Okay, so I am back with my commentary on the indictments and charges against Luigi Mangione. Terrorism, in its broadest sense, is the use of violence against non-combatants to achieve political or ideological aims. The term is used in this regard primarily to refer to international violence during peacetime or in the context of war against non-combatants. There are various definitions of terrorism with no universal agreement about it. Different definitions of terrorism emphasize its randomness, its aim to instill fear, and its broadest impact beyond its immediate victims. There is no legal or scientific consensus on the definition of terrorism. Various legal systems and governmental agencies use different definitions of terrorism, and governments have been reluctant to formulate an agreed-upon, legally binding definition. Difficulties arise from the fact that the term has become politically and emotionally charged. A simple definition proposed by the United States Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, CCP-CJ, by terrorism studies scholar Alex P. Schmidt in 1992, based on already internationally accepted definition of war crimes as peaceful equivalents of war crimes, was not accepted. So, that was the context as to the definition of terrorism. Now, I believe that terrorism should be defined as someone who has used weapons of violence against numerous unarmed individuals who are not participants of a war for the purpose of inflicting coercion, destruction, and fear in the promotion of a political, ideological, or philosophical agenda. I also have a more progressive definition of terrorists. I define terrorists as someone who has used instruments of violence against unarmed individuals who happen to be racial, ethnic, national, gender, sexual, orientational, socio-economic, or political minorities with the purpose of promoting an ideological aim. We don't know for certain if Luigi Mangione committed an act of terror. He's written, if that manifesto is real, that he did not want to harm innocent individuals en masse, and that is why he did not use an explosive device. That alone works against terrorism charges. Now, do I believe he's guilty of murder? It's potentially possible that he is guilty of murder. But I think the prosecution has an uphill battle to prove that it was an act of terror and to prove that he is in fact a terrorist. In the manifesto, he made clear that his intent was, allegedly, if he is confirmed to have done this, one individual, not multiple innocent individuals. So therefore, one can conclude that he could potentially be guilty of murder of one person, and that those charges should be allowed to go forward. But one has to also be reasonable and realize that he may not be guilty of terrorism, which often indicates widespread horror with widespread victims, with widespread ramifications and intentions intended. I share concerns that Luigi Mangione may not receive a fair trial, that his due process may be violated, his Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself may be violated, and that his rights in general, constitutional rights in general, to not face cruel and unusual punishment may be violated. In addition to being violated is double jeopardy. Now, double jeopardy means you're not supposed to be charged for the same crime in multiple jurisdictions or charged again for the same crime once tried. And we know that is happening here. But I'll let you be the judge of to what extent do you want to delve into his guilt or his innocence. I want to hear from you, the people, whether you agree or not that he's innocent or guilty. I do not necessarily believe that he is guilty. I do not necessarily believe that he is not guilty. I am one of those neutral people who are waiting for all of the facts to unfold, and then I will make my determinative analysis after the conclusion of those points being unrolled out in the trial. I don't think Luigi Mangione will have the widespread support that he has from huge factors of the country if it were not for universal health care's corrupt business practices. And I say they are corrupt because people were paying thousands of dollars a year for quality health insurance, and when they needed to use their insurance, their health care claim was denied. To me, that gives capitalism a bad name, it gives capitalism a bad representation, and it represents a crony form of capitalism, which we should all oppose. It is not communism and it is not socialism to simply want capitalism to be a fair game, to crack down on monopolies, and to make sure that corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse and manipulation are taken out of the system so that prices truly cost what they cost and people are delivered quality service for the money that they have paid. I think that is more than fair. I think that is more than just. I think that is more than right. And had they not denied people at a rate of 32%, the healthcare industry's denial rate is 16% on average. Yet United Healthcare's healthcare denial claim rate was 32%, largely because under CEO the late Brian Thompson, United Healthcare used an artificial intelligence AI software which denied 90% of claims artificially and automatically. So, I am not endorsing, nor am I expressing support or condemnation for what has transpired in the December 4th events. But what I am simply saying is that I understand what has culminated into people rationalizing or supporting what the alleged CEO suspect, Luigi Mangione, is alleged to have done. What we have to do to make sure that there are less Mangiones is to make sure that the system works as fair as possible, that people are not taken advantage of, that people are treated properly, that people receive quality service and quality customer products for the money that they have paid. I think that is more than fair. And I think it is perfectly understandable, if not reasonable, what transpired in the December 4th events. I do not condone it. I do not endorse it. I do not support it. I do not promote it. I do not think it was right. But we have got to get a hold of the national animus and anger and resentment that is deeply held by large segments of the populace if we are to prevent this from happening again. People are tired. People are fed up. And keep in mind, this is very important. They have tried to time and time again, tried to peacefully resolve these matters. They went to court. They tried to resolve it through peaceful demonstrations and protests. No one listens to these people. It is important that we start as a society listening to each other before things get hostile, before things get violent, before things take a dark turn. We have got to listen to each other when it is not popular to do so, when it is not necessarily a winning issue. And I do think in the future, as a subsequent result of all of this, there will be, how can I put this? And again, I am not expressing support nor condemnation for the alleged CEO suspect. I am only seeking to explain the events that culminated up to the events. You know, people watched during the 2008-2007 financial crisis. They watched the United States federal government. They watched their government work to appropriate hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, and funnel it into bailing out Wall Street. The Wall Street bailout was a mistake. If I was a member of Congress or the President of the United States, I would have vetoed and voted to reject. I feel as though true capitalism allows them to figure it out on their own. True capitalism says that if the market fails, that is fair game, just as when the market is successful and profits go up for people and corporations, that is fair game as well. Therefore, when the losses happen, and they will, because that's a part of life, gains and losses. They must weather those losses on their own, the same way that they took all the prosperity for themselves. So, no pain, no gain, essentially. And it was a mistake to bail them out. Eventually, people would have invested, and the markets would have started flooding, and the markets would have been restabilized in about 18 to 36 months. It would have took about a year and a half to 3 years to naturally prop up the market through reinvestments. Voluntary reinvestments into the stock market. It would have taken, like I said, about 18 to 36 months, but at least the people would have not been responsible for the bailout. At least the people would not have the animus that they have, such as the Occupy Wall Street movement. The Occupy Wall Street movement, in many ways, was the precursor in the beginning of the Luigi Mangione movement. If you listen to these people, it's not necessarily that they have a hatred for capitalism and free markets. The problem is that they understand that free markets in the modern era has a lot of waste, fraud, abuse, corruption, and manipulation involved, such as price gouging, such as artificially raising the prices. For example, if you've ever been to a hospital, you know that they will charge up to $600 for a blanket that we all know took about 60 cents to make in India, if less than that, if more than that. But they're charging thousands of percent more than it actually cost. And that's the problem. I understand that they have to make a profit, but the profit should be within reason, so that people do not feel that they are being abused, so people do not feel that they are getting the raw end of a deal, so people do not feel that they are being cheated. We have got to have a capitalism for the people. We have got to have a democratic capitalist system. A system that lowers the potentiality of more Luigi springing up and rebelling against their fellow citizen. We have got to make people feel a sense of assimilation with the American system. But the only way to do that is to make the American system of economics and government as homogenous and agreeable to the people and connected to the people, more importantly, as possible. You cannot stop more Luigis from being created if you're not willing to tackle the problems that created such people from existing in the first place. It's on us as a society to do more that stops the Luigi Mangiones from feeling as though they have to do this. We have to start listening to each other. When people are peacefully demonstrating, when people are peacefully protesting, when people are peacefully writing letters and writing appeals and demanding that they be heard, when people are going to court in order to seek justice and reprieves, we have got to start working together as Americans to listen to those people. All of these people that support Luigi Mangione, whether you agree or disagree with their support for him, feel unheard. And that is why they latched on to the most radical action you can take, which is to murder someone in pursuit of a goal. It should have never came to this. It should have never gotten to this. And again, I'm not in support, but I'm only seeking to explain what happened. The purpose of this video is for educational and informative purposes. It is not to promote any criminal organizations. It is not to promote any violent extremists. It is not to promote any political, ideological, or philosophical agenda. With that being said, that concludes my thoughts and my commentary. It also concludes the reading of the bills of indictments against Luigi Mangione and the New York People of New York versus Mangione case and the United States versus Mangione case. Also the criminal complaint as well as the indictment. Let me know what you think. Do you believe Luigi Mangione is guilty or not guilty? I want to know. Do you believe that the evidence against Luigi Mangione is sufficient enough to actually convict? Do you believe that the jury should nullify the verdict and send him home not guilty? Do you believe that Luigi's defense should pursue an insanity defense or an incompetence defense or a duress defense? So, let me know in the comment section, what do you believe? Also, let me know lastly, what do you believe will be the lasting political ramifications of what Luigi Mangione is alleged to have done if he is confirmed to have done it? Do you believe it will lead to single-payer health care? Do you believe it will lead to general changes in the healthcare system overall? Do you believe it will lead to everyone having health insurance as a human right? Or do you believe it actually moved the goalpost back and will actually lead to a more free market healthcare system like we already have? So let me know in the comment section, what do you believe, in addition to that question, is the lasting political ramifications on Capitol Hill in general? Do you believe people will move more closer to the left or more closer to the right or remain in the center as a subsequent result of these actions that have taken place on December 4th, 2024? And do you believe that Americans and the world in general are inspired by the December 4th, 2024 events, and that we should also work hard to fight against any terrorism wherever it exists and by whoever does it? With that being said, that concludes our video. Let me know in the comment section whether you agree or disagree with this video. Let me know if you have any comments to the questions that I just raised at the end of this video. And with that being said, take care. I'll see you on the next video. I hope you enjoy your New Year's. Peace.